So, good morning, everyone. This is the, wait, are we live?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session, and it's Thursday, July 14th, 2022. It is 10:39 a.m. This is set to go until 11:30 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. We have a full boardroom this morning. We have Vice Chair Ty Menzer as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Ramiro Chavez, and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and Public Works Director Jennifer Walker. She didn't get enough of us yesterday, so she's here for seconds. The discussion on today's agenda is Public Works Department Water and Sewer Utility Rate Study. And I see many staff members have joined in the boardroom as well as via Zoom. So with that, I'm handing it over to Jennifer.
Directly to Jennifer to expedite the whole briefing, so hopefully she can introduce the guests today.
Actually, Tim will do that. I think what I would start out with saying is that I love data. I hope you're going to appreciate the data. And the story that it tells, because it's pretty compelling. So with that, Mr. Wilson.
Okay, good morning, Commissioners. Tim Wilson, Water Resources Manager, Public Works. Also have Assistant Director Karen Weiss with us, Joe Plahuta, Senior Water Resources Engineer. We also have our consultants with us from FCS Group. This is Toggy Ocker and Angie Sanchez, who will be presenting today as well. Just a little bit of background, and hopefully the PowerPoint will come up here soon, but back in 2018 and 2019, the board previously recognized the potential value of water and sewer utility consolidation, and directed the board, or directed Public Works at that time, to investigate consolidation. So this has been a roughly four-year process to date. The first step in that process, first official step, was to conduct a feasibility study on consolidation to explore the legalities, the regulatory considerations, and other considerations regarding feasibility. That was conducted by HDR and completed in 2020, and identified for the county a somewhat clear path to consolidation, and identified the next steps that would need to be taken within that evaluation. So then Thurston County Public Works contracted with the FCS Group to perform a water and sewer utility rate study. I see our PowerPoint's up. To consider the benefits of a consolidated model and the impacts of those models to and benefits to our customer base. So I'll start right out by saying staff are encouraged by the results of what we've seen so far and what we'll be sharing today, and believe they're very compelling in terms of creating stability within our utilities, which is a goal. So the main topics for today's presentation, we're going to ask FCS to discuss the results of the rate study. We're going to discuss the timing of potential consolidation and what the next steps in that process would look like. And then we will discuss 2023 rate increases, which would be part of the budget process. So we're going to hang on for just a minute while we're pulling the PowerPoint up. Are there any questions on that before we start? And I guess I would just ask, I know there will probably be some questions and conversation about the ARPA funds. If the board agrees, maybe we could hold those until the end because there is a lot of information that's going to be coming forward.
Okay, any questions?
Not at this point from me.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Let's share the screen now.
You can stop sharing it. I guess Angela's sharing her screen.
Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. And Tim just covered these points, so we're going to jump ahead to the next slide. Existing county service areas. So before we get into the results of the rate study, I wanted to provide some perspective on the different communities and the different types of services that are provided water and sewer utility service within the county. Tamishin, Boston Harbor, Grand Mound, and Olympic View. A couple of things we wanted to point out. First off, starting with approximate system age. Tamishin, approximately in the 1970s, the oldest system. Boston Harbor and Olympic View in the 90s, and then the newest system, Grand Mound, in the 2000s. So later on, when we're talking about consolidation and taking turns with capital projects, the system ages lend themselves nicely to taking turns as one system might need more repair and maintenance and replacement projects. Another system, such as Grand Mound, a little bit newer, there is more time for them to anticipate those needs and sort of spread those out over a larger customer group. Now in total, there's over 800 accounts, Grand Mound being the largest at roughly half of the total accounts. What's interesting, Tamishin, Olympic View, entirely residential. Boston Harbor, mostly residential, but a handful of commercial customers. Grand Mound in particular, though, they have a mix of residential, commercial, light industrial. And so you can sort of see there when we look at the percent of total water revenues and percent of total sewer revenues. Despite being less than half of the accounts, Grand Mound customers make up about 3/4 of both water and sewer revenues. And there can be the temptation to compare these rates for these systems to Olympia or Tumwater, for example. But in general, this is a pretty small system, even on a combined basis. Olympia has over 20,000 connections, Tumwater roughly 8,000 connections. So there's certainly a different order of magnitude looking at 800 accounts versus 10 or 20,000. So that'll show up when we talk about the rates in these particular sub-areas. Okay, next slide, please. So our main goal for this study was to project the finances for each individual utility, and on a combined basis, the combined water and combined sewer utilities. So that ended up being 9 different revenue requirement forecasts. And so what we ended up doing, we take your current revenues under today's rates, and we forecast out based on today's budget and today's capital plan, annual operating expenses, annual capital needs, and then forecast that against current revenues. Any difference there would need to be covered through additional rates through rate increases. And so we did that for 9 different systems. And when we look at how much revenue is needed, it's really a function of these 4 boxes. We want to make sure that rate revenues are allowing for each utility to have appropriate operating and capital reserves. That's that fiscal policy box. We want to make sure the rate revenues are covering today's operating expenses, as well as forecasted growth in operating expenses due to inflation or changes in service levels. And then the last couple of boxes there, other financing and rate funded capital, those have to do with how you fund your capital program. Could be rates, could be borrowing. If you borrow, principal and interest would be associated with that. And then in the past, the county has supplemented when there's not been enough rate revenue to cover capital projects, supplemented with REIT funding to help pay for some of those utilities' capital projects.
1 or 2?
Two. Well, good, we were all in agreement.
Everything is gonna be, yeah, when we talk about rate, everything is gonna be 2 today?
And this
Pretty much, yeah. There's old debt that was out of REIT 1, but that's been retired.
So our main goal is to make sure that each individual utility could be self-sufficient on its own, as well as on a consolidated basis, making sure that those combined water and sewer utilities could also be self-sufficient to lessen or entirely remove reliance on REIT 2 funding. Okay, next slide, please. So I wanted to park on this slide for a bit. I think this will be the main conversation of, why are we considering consolidation? And when we talk about consolidation, the county already is partially consolidated in a sense of management of the utilities, personnel, supplies and materials, equipment, and some of the administrative processes are already shared by these different utilities. What's different is the rates. Each specific area for water and for sewer have specific individual rates. And as those customers pay those rates, they go into funds that are specific to a water or sewer utility in a particular area. And so what that does is it creates time for staff to track revenues and expenditures in separate funds, have to maintain separate rate schedules for each of these individual areas. There's end-of-year reporting that you have to do on each of these funds on an individual basis. So those are some of the things that you're already doing on a combined basis. But one of the things that you're not doing right now is postage stamp rates. And we refer to it as postage stamp rates because, just like when you're mailing a letter, mailing it from Olympia to Vancouver costs the same as mailing a letter from Olympia to Miami, for example. And so when we're looking at a consolidated option for water and sewer utilities, we would move away from individual water utility rates to a single set of rates that would be applicable to all customers within the service area.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, sir.
this is kind of getting complicated. Are we gonna be able to ask a couple questions as we move along here for clarification?
Tim, what's the preference for us to ask questions during the presentation?
Well, we certainly prefer that as many questions as possible can
Could
wait
wait.
until the end,
Okay.
if that's acceptable.
We need to make sure we have time for them to ask
Yes.
the questions.
Yes.
So I know you have to leave at 11:20, so we'll try to zoom through and make sure you have enough time for questions at the end. But some of the key advantages we want to focus on are when you go under a consolidated set of rates, there's a shared planning aspect for capital projects. So right now, if a capital project comes up for a smaller utility, trying to spread that cost over a smaller group of customers, that can have the impact of being prohibitively expensive for a small set of customers. So if you instead have a larger group of customers paying into a single fund, you can spread the capital burden over a larger number of customers, and the equity there is then achieved over time. As maybe it's this year, the focus is on Tamashin. Maybe in a future year, it could be Boston Harbor or Grand Mound, but the equity there is achieved over time. But this can only be achieved if you have consolidated rates and a consolidated fund structure. There's also the benefit of reducing the administrative processes of some of the county staff with, right now you have to figure out, okay, how do we split personnel amongst the individual utilities? Is it a percentage of time? Is it time tracking? How do we spread those costs over the individual utilities? There could be the benefit there of reducing that administrative burden as well, maintaining fewer rate schedules, fewer funds. And we highlighted a piece of an American Water Works Association article from late 2021. And I won't read through all of that, but just wanted to focus on, from their perspective, consolidation really provided a good opportunity for utilities based on their experience to move away from reactive maintenance and be a bit more proactive in maintenance and capital planning, with the added benefit of, as you're doing that, that can help protect and preserve water quality, as an example. And Tim mentioned earlier the study by HDR. They focused on, can we do this and how do we do this? And this rate study that we worked on is, what do those rates look like if the county were to move to a consolidated water or sewer utility? Okay, next slide. We'll get into the results here. Pretty small on the screen, but I see everybody has printouts, so that'll be helpful. What we have on the top of the table are the results of the individual utility rate forecasts. So starting at the top there, Tamashin, you can see under today's rates, about $82 per month. for the base charge. That would increase to just over $200 per month if Tamishan were to pay for its own capital projects all on their own, not under a consolidated utility. And you can see there the rate per 100 cubic feet would increase from $2.75 up to $6.82. Boston Harbor, not as much of an increase there. Their current base rate is $42 per month. That would increase to just over $56 per month. And their charge would go from $2.77 up to $3.71. And Grand Mountain there, on an individual basis, would have the smallest increases compared to Tamishan and Boston Harbor. Their base rate would go from $46 per month up to just under $51 per month. What we did is we modeled a 5-year phase-in for consolidation starting in 2024. One of the more striking examples there is Tamishan. Instead of a 2028 base charge of $204 per month, that would actually be a decrease down to $54 per month. So right now, Tamishan's $82 per month for the base charge. Their rate would actually decrease down to $54 per month at the end of the 5-year phase-in period. Boston Harbor would not see a decrease from today's rates, but their overall rate increases would be moderated. Instead of $57 per month, their base rate would be about $54 per month. Grand Mountain, on the other hand, would see a slightly higher rate under the individual forecast. If Grand Mountain were to stick on their own, they'd be paying a base rate of about $51 per month by 2028. Under consolidation, their rate would be a few dollars higher per month, $54 in 2028 for the base charge. On the next slide, we have some sample bills for an example, single-family customer using 700 cubic feet of usage. And you can see there for Tamishan, their overall savings per month for the water bill would be over $175 per month, so significant savings there. Boston Harbor, on their water bills by 2028, would be saving about $7 per month. Grand Mountain would see, again, as I noted earlier, a slight increase. Their monthly bill for a typical single-family customer would go up by about $4 per month in 2028. Next slide, please. So that was the water utility, and this is the sewer utility findings. A similar story for Tamishan as an example. Currently, their monthly base rate is about $145 per month. That would need to increase by about $100 by 2028 to cover their financial obligations on an individual basis, increasing to about $256 per month. Boston Harbor would go from about $113 up to $145 per month by 2028. Grand Mound increases much lower, going from about $95 per month up to $105 per month. And then Olympic View there at the bottom, you can see, would go from $109 up to $154 per month. Under consolidation, all utilities would be paying about $113 per month by 2028. So significant savings for 3 of those utilities there, as we highlight on the next slide. Sewer sample bills. You can see, Tamishan savings of about $144 per month by 2028. Boston Harbor savings of over $32 per month by 2028. Olympic View savings of about $42 per month. And similar to water, Grand Mountain would be paying slightly higher rates under a consolidated approach versus an individual utility approach. They'd be paying about $8 per month higher by 2028 under consolidation. Next slide, please. So we've been talking about the dollars, but wanted to share what the percentages look like. So for Tamishan and Olympic View, looking at those in particular, you can start to see kind of the ups and downs that would be required to fund their capital program. A year of 3%, a year of 5%, and then 3 years of 25%, and dropping down to 10%. What we're trying to do, and is shown there in the bottom row under consolidated, is much lower rate increases overall and smoothed out. There's not a big jump from 5 to 25 and down to 10 because it's a group effort under consolidation. We're able to leverage all customers and sort of moderate and smooth out those increases over time. And same story for sewer. You can see there, we're trying to keep it in the 2 to 3% range under consolidation, and that's the overall revenue needs for each of those utilities. Depending on where you're starting, as we were just talking about on previous slides, some utilities would be seeing a decrease, and one particular utility, Ground Mountain, would be seeing an increase. But overall, it's a pretty moderate increase for overall revenues. And with that, I'll hand it back to Tim. He'll take us through a couple of summary slides, and then we'll be ready for questions.
Okay, thank you, Tagi. So just in summary, here and looking at the information, it's apparent most individual utilities that represent roughly 55% of our customer base are going to immediately benefit from the lower rates under consolidation. As Tagi mentioned, the consolidated rates are proposed to occur over a 5-year period, beginning in 2024 and ending in 2028. And the rate structure is based upon an average residential bill. So you can see what the dollar amounts look like over that time. I think it's really important to call out that even the ratepayers who see a minimum increase, the $7.82 5 years out, would achieve long-term benefit in terms of stable rate-funded capital and less volatility and dependence on REIT and other funding sources. So it's kind of that the long game in seeing the benefit for all the customers. Guiding principle for sound utility management, and we've spoke to this before, is that rate-funded capital piece. So moving away from having to come to the board for refunding on these capital projects and moving away from the model in which we received these utilities, or the county received these utilities, in which they were unstable, volatile. This would be an important step in the right direction for addressing that. Next slide, please. So just to outline what the next steps in consolidation would look like. First of all, I want to back up and say that the two different utilities that have utility advisory committees, those are Boston Harbor and Tamashan, have been presented this information at their meetings and given an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback on it. Both of them, I feel safe in saying, are supportive at this point. The Tamashan utility, obviously, if you look at the rates, are very, very supportive. Boston Harbor seems supportive as well, are asking some additional clarifying questions, but at this point are supportive. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
From
you characterize it well.
Okay. The next steps would be to, in the fourth quarter of 2022, to develop a transition plan. So that would look like, what does our communication look like with ratepayers, any regulatory agencies, you, the board, and other interested or affected parties. We would do our work with the utility advisory committees and develop some recommendations for the board in terms of what a productive relationship looks like in regard to those committees. Would they be managed as they are now independently? Would they be merged? What that would look like. We would work on public outreach on utility consolidation beginning in the first quarter of 2023. We would want to create a website or take the steps necessary to solicit feedback from our entire customer base. We would need to develop fund and budgets and adoption of those second through fourth quarters of 2023. So this would align very nicely with budget development for the 2024-2025 period. And then with anything surrounding the utilities, there would be code updates required. and a resolution for the board to consider to form a combined utility. So we anticipate that in the fourth quarter of 2023, and we anticipate that all of this work could likely be done to align this with 2024 adoption. So those would be the next steps. Next slide, please. So in the meantime, as has been mentioned before, we are obviously not keeping up with the increasing costs of operating these utilities. So if you, and these rates are predicated on moving forward with a consolidated utility. So as you look at these, you will see a somewhat artificially low anticipated rate increase for Tamishan of 5%. In the absence of a move toward consolidation, there would be a need for some more immediate recommendations for significant rate increases for Tamishan and Olympic View. So if you look at the Tamishan line, in the absence of moving towards consolidation, we would be recommending a 22% increase for Tamishan and a 10 on the water side and a 10% increase on the sewer side. Similarly, in the Olympic View utility, we would be requesting an 18% increase with an unconsolidated model. So the other two utilities would not change. So that is where we are. We would answer any questions that you have at this point.
Angela, you can stop sharing your screen now, thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, or thank you, staff. Commissioners, questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Have we put together a good history of why we're where we are today? What brought about a failure that the county had to get involved? The whole thing, we know what happened in Grand Mountain, but these other ones, as far as selling this, that's kind of my question to get started, the justification of why we might have to do what we have to do. And for Tiggy, I guess I would ask, on that American Water Works Association, did they consider in their article if this was fair to all, or you know, one group's picking up the cost for the whole thing, and really they're not quite the culprits as the rest of them, that kind of thing? Was that ever brought up in that article?
I have to go back and look at that, but their conclusions, I think, were more at a general level, but you're spot on. Anytime there's multiple groups with different rates moving towards a uniform rate, there's gonna be some that go up and some that go down. That's true.
Okay, then recognizing that, I guess, Public Utilities Commission has nothing to do with this, is that it? Because we're a county entity, so they don't regulate any of this stuff? They would regulate it if it was owned and operated by a private entity though, right? Is there a comparison at all with what a private entity would be charging for this same service? Do we have anything like that that we can fall back on so that when we do a public awareness presentation or problem presentation, we say, yeah, Tumwater, it's this, but it's not the same. But if this was turned over to a private utilities group, this is what you could expect. Do we have anything like that?
Angie, do you want to field that?
So I'm racking my brain, Commissioner Edwards, on that one for local private utility providers for water and sewer service, but my utility provider down in the Lewis County, Boisfort Valley Water Company, for water service alone, my monthly bill is about $120. So, you know,
How many customers?
How many cubic feet are you using for that?
about 700.
So you fall within that average.
I would just say, as a part of the study, we did have FCS group
Yes.
look at some comparable sized utilities, so we can compare apples to apples, so maybe you guys can talk to that.
Right, and we can, look at that bill comparison, but just to kind of go back to your original question, I think, which is if I'm a private utility, what might this look like? And being regulated, there are some requirements for private utilities that you will invest in your system. There will be no deferred capital. There is a return on investment, for that particular capital. So using that methodology, you would come up with a different rate and likely a higher rate. Something that we could,
Do
look
they
into.
still give you a 14% return on capital?
It varies, kind of depending on where you are, but it's a high rate of return on
Yeah,
capital, absolutely.
It's pretty darn high. How did you guys figure in inflation into your future schedules of activity? I mean, did you go with what it was last month or something at 8% versus maybe what the retail inflation is, versus what it is this month? I think it went up again. I think on the financial news this morning, it had some that got bumped up.
Always
recently.
going up, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's not gonna go down right away. So how did you calculate that? So in other words, did you get to looking at these figures and say, oh God, they're never gonna go for this? So maybe you toned it down a little bit, but toning
We
it
didn't
down
cook
is
the books.
not, toning it down is not realistic.
We're not here to manage the manipulated numbers.
No, right.
And I think
I just wanna make sure.
my opinion, in the inflation is more commerce and transaction. Utility rate's a little bit different. The utility rate is about services and how the capital can provide the services to those.
You still need somebody to read the meters, dig out the broken line, fix it, drive the stuff over to the
Let's move on to
diesel,
that. Sure.
all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely, and so since we did look at a long-term forecast, and again, you're seeing the short term, but it is a longer-term forecast, we did apply annual inflation rates to those particular, approved budget line items in order to get to the future
What rate
period.
did you use?
Do we know the future exec might be able to if we don't? And
You probably started this 6-8 months ago,
we
right?
did, and so I think the important part also is that we're looking at long-term, so we don't wanna increase rates and take the spike year and keep it at that for 10 years, because that's not where we've been. We also look at historical indices to say, where have we been over the last 3-5 years? Yes, we do have this spike, not sure how long it's gonna continue, it might, spike up a little bit higher, but we also don't wanna take the spike and forecast off the spike, so we do take an average of those. And so it's probably a little bit more moderated, I would imagine, than we have in terms of the 8% or 9% that we're probably seeing in terms of year to date today. But we absolutely, year over year, have applied inflation on those budget figures.
Are there any other options of a lesser magnitude that could be looked at? Maybe that might be giving a utility, to a private outfit and let them fight it out. What we're doing is we end up subsidizing the value of these homes by doing whatever we do, especially if we use other tax dollars, REIT for an example. We're actually subsidizing the value of those homes.
I can speak to that real quick, and the whole idea behind consolidation and the benefit of this consolidation is moving away from that model where we are asking the board to subsidize via REIT. I mean, if you go back to the briefing yesterday and all of the utility projects, there were a significant number of those that had REIT funding connected to them. So this is truly a move to make the users of the system pay for the utility. It is moving towards a utility best management practice and away from that need to come forward and subsidize.
And I think that's where the history comes in and becomes so important to lay that out.
We do have that history, and you've heard that piecemeal in the state of the utilities briefings, kind of that independent history. That is certainly something that we can develop some information on and include in the web page as we do public outreach. And that's great feedback to kind of, provide that historical framework for why we have these utilities and what we're doing.
And some comparisons as well, I think.
Maybe just to answer one of your questions, just to complete the conversation, Madam Chair. I don't know if you were here as a commissioner, maybe you were. 5 years ago, I engaged with the Thurston Public Utility District.
Oh, yeah, I was here.
And we were in the process really for the PUD to take over all our utilities. Great conversation. They went through a process of a cost-benefit analysis. It was not an economic benefit to them, and they back away from that approach. It's just, and I think the reason is those are smaller utilities. They don't have the economy of scale to maintain what they need or improve what is coming down the road. And that's why this model came as part of the conversation. Let's explore this. And I'm glad they agree are to this point, really. So I stop there because I'm sure Commissioner Messer has questions.
Yeah, I want to make sure that we get Commissioner Menser's questions before he goes. So go ahead, sir.
I'll make it easy for you. This was very clear to understand. I like what I see. I'm fully supportive. Go for it. Is my 2 cents. I like what I see here. Very, very clear.
I mean, a very good presentation with a lot of good facts. You know, I do too.
I was expecting it to be, and I think you guys' comments you said at the beginning, probably you were online, like I was expecting it to be a little more draconian or, you know, this makes sense. I mean, we've got the bigger Grand Mound area that can help mitigate the, you know, it's a smaller version of the lot, you know, thing where it's like, when you can spread, you know, it's great being on the board a lot, like you need $7 million, oh, let's raise it by 1 cent, you know, and then you have it, and $7 million flows in, like having Grand Mound as a bigger area to help mitigate impact across the whole system makes a lot of sense, and it's not gonna, to my eyes, it's not gonna affect anybody unnecessarily harshly.
I do want to make a comment, and this related to the REIT dollars. I know what is the objective related to associated with this program. But let's make sure that we don't close that door.
Sure.
And because things change in the future, and I think we need to be careful as to how we sell the idea. This predicated on we're not going to be coming back to the board to us for any REIT dollars in the future, because that's not really practical.
No, and I hope that we did not convey that message. That was.
So I just want to clarify
That's
the point of related to the REIT dollars.
Okay. Commissioner Edwards, any additional questions? Go ahead, sir.
Have there ever been any examples where, and I don't know if state law allows it or not, where a group could review what's being proposed, one of these groups could review what's being proposed, and then they could do kind of a counter offer internally amongst themselves? Do they want to form their own little HOA, for an example, and see if they could pull that off? I mean, we took this over from private entities at some point because of a problem. Somebody didn't want to pay, or wasn't paying, it was dilapidated, whatever it was. And be able to say to these groups, because the reality of, I've held public hearings before as a water purveyor. I can tell you they're not fun. And a lot of times, the Public Utilities Commission has already come out and told you behind the scenes, hey, the rates are going here, you need to do this, you have to develop this public utility or asset, and you can make 14%, I think was the last one.
That's right.
And I tell you what, Grandma doesn't like that when she's sitting there, and if you're gonna be truthful about it, you gotta tell Grandma, I don't care what you say, what you say doesn't matter. The Utility Commission has already set the rates, this is what's coming, all this is a formality, you know, and that's not being a very good politician if you say that. So I know the reality of imposing change, and boy, it doesn't go over very good. I'm just gonna say that early on. So those comparisons, those legal abilities to make decisions for those people that wanna take a shot at doing it themselves? Okay, let's see what happens, because, I don't know. I mean, I've said this before, I am not a fan of communism. Communism takes from all to support. I don't like it, and I'll be real honest about it, and it causes a rift in a capitalist society. So just, I'm a realist, and if you can answer some of those questions and put together that history and some comparisons, and, okay, if you don't like this, here, Washington Water will buy you out, and see what you get.
It's interesting, I don't know how we tie this project with communism, but.
Anytime you take from those that have it and give it to those that don't, and subsidize the profit margin for an individual on the government's back or the society's back, that's communism.
Nobody's benefiting from this. I think everybody.
Oh, yeah,
everybody's benefiting.
you say nobody's benefiting?
The
There's
ratepayers
gonna be
benefit.
some people benefiting from this. There's
They-
going to be.
They're ratepayers.
Thank you very much for that perspective, and I think it'll help in terms of how we develop, if we have the board's approval to continue moving
I
forward
think
with this and how we.
we're in a
talk about it.
situation we have to. I mean, it's, you know, it's not that, I don't have to be in love with the program. I think you did a great job on putting this together and presenting it. But, the reality is, somebody's gonna have to sell it. It ain't gonna make much difference with me. But others it is. That's just the reality.
Yeah, and I think part of the public outreach with all those, utility payers, there is gonna be, we're gonna be getting all that information before the board may consider taking a final action on this.
I think
We
it
we
would
meet
help.
regularly with the two communities. We'll be meeting with one this afternoon as part of our regular interaction with them. And we will produce the information and be very transparent and allow significant time to get feedback from all of our ratepayers as well, so.
And I think important to remember, the proposed 2023 rates, the increases, that is based off of the consolidation moving forward. If we choose not to move forward with that effort, the rates are going to, those proposed increases are going to be different than, and higher than what we have.
Yeah, but related to that, I think there is a legislative action the board needs to take in 2023 to make it a reality.
Understood.
So if the board chooses not to, for whatever reason, implement this program, the 2024 rates will be affected, not the 2023, right?
Significantly.
Yeah.
Right, I just wanna make sure
Yeah.
everyone's tracking on that, yeah.
Madam Chair, back to you.
Yes, and I don't have any questions. I thought it was a great presentation. So it is 11:22.
So if I may, what I'm hearing is the board is supportive to taking the next steps as outlined by staff, meaning start developing the transition plan, start getting the public outreach, and that's gonna take us through the whole 2023. And at some point, we'll bring all that to the board for you to take a formal action on the implementation or not of this consolidation proposal. That work?
It does for me, but I hope that part of that development of this plan will be those suggestions.
Yeah. So
I think it'll make the plan easier to sell. I'm not against the plan, I'm just a realist.
no, your perspective is valuable because you were in that business. So
Well, and how many presentations have we had with Lot where they show their rates and then they show all of our utility rates and where.
Yeah. Well, I look at Tamashan and I'm not sure how those residents would be able to afford.
Yeah.
what
Yeah, oh,
the
I mean,
proposed
it's
impact
crazy.
is.
It's
Double the
actually,
funding for them.
but good job, you guys did a good job.
Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.